So during this session, we're going to talk about what our learning outcomes, levels of learning statements. We're going to define for our purposes, our in here, program and course learning objectives. We're going to talk about what makes an effective outcome or an effective objective. And then we're going to analyze, make sure we got effective outcomes for our programs and courses. And then we're going to map them all together. Now, before we get started, let's everybody get on the same page with regards to definition and context. Okay? I'm going to use, and there's a school of thought that will probably remove me from this earth, what I'm about to say. But for our purposes, outcomes and objectives are going to be the same thing, okay? And what we are talking about are what is it our students have to learn, okay? I think outcomes in some contexts is the percentage and the placement and the post all that. Okay, I'm not talking about those kinds of things, but I will use that word because after a while you get tired of saying the same word over and over again. So student learning outcomes, let's define those. We are going to have program student learning outcomes, not our objectives, whichever one, not 50% placement in a job, but the actual objective that they have to learn to say that they have graduated from your program, okay? And then you have your course objectives, which is what they will learn when they take your course. Does everybody understand what we're talking about here? We have program objectives, course objectives.
Just to be sure, since
Yes.
I'm new, so the program objective you're talking about overarching.
Yeah, what
objectives,
education is,
and-
what you.
And that's within that, the course objectives.
Yes.
And the objectives will be have
And we're going to have student learning outcomes at the course level and at the program. So when we use the term SLO, I'm referring to either one under whatever context that we have. Now, I'm sure you all have been worked with writing objectives before, but we haven't done it in a while, since I've been here. So we're going to kind of take a step back and kind of review what good student learning objectives are. And I'm going to give you some tools to do that with, and let's get started. Oh, and we will be stopping at 11:20 to give us time to get over to the library for lunch, and hopefully it'll be there. Because I'm over here. I'm just hoping to drop it off. All right, so our learning objectives today for this session, which will extend to the afternoon, describe what learning objectives are and their role in instruction, identify components of learning objectives, write appropriate learning objectives for your program course, list steps to mapping course learning objectives to program, and explain how course and program SLOs are connected. So our definition for learning outcomes / SLOs / objectives. Student learning outcomes identify observable and measurable knowledge, skills, and attitudes a student obtains by the end of a learning experience. So the important components there are they're observable and measurable, which is really what we're going to hone in on today. That key component right there. And they assess or delineate knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values that we want our students to have by the time they leave us. Now, we got all kinds of levels of objectives. You have institution, we have our college, school, division, department, program, course, down to you know, if you think about course, down to a daily set of objectives. So if I, in my course, want to teach students how to solve a multi-step equation, then one of my daily objectives at the very beginning of class is to make sure they can add, right? So we can delineate. Now, this does not have up here, but we're not forgetting your accreditation objectives or outcomes. I know nursing, they have their own set of UN accreditors. Y'all love those people. And then my education people have standards that are set by that accreditation. I don't know about it, but those two I know for a fact. But those aren't listed up here, but those are also standards and objectives. When we're talking about aligning, we want to go all the way through, from the lesson all the way up through the institution, past to our accreditors. All right, so let's have a conversation after I move this little gizmo out of the way. So the title of this is From Salads to Outcomes, and this would be why. These two pictures have similar ingredients. Why is only one a salad? Comments? Feedback?
Well, you can eat one with a fork.
Well, you can eat it
But
all.
I'll do that.
It's all a plate.
It's on a plate.
All the ingredients are mixed together.
All the ingredients are mixed together.
The ones on the plate are prepared to be eaten easily.
Yes, the ones on the plate are prepared. I think that looks really good, and I'm hungry so bad right now. Maybe you should, this was supposed to be happening after lunch, and I probably. All right, well, let's see what the slide has to say. The difference in ingredients, is the degree of preparation and integration makes only one image a salad. The ingredients contribute to the salad, but the salad is more than just the sum of its parts. So, your course outcomes, your course, at the course level, identify the ingredients that make up your program outcomes, right? These are all the little pieces in your program outcomes characterize the salad. So basically the way we want to think about this is your course outcomes are these types of vegetables, and then when you get your students and they graduated, they're a nice big plate of salad. I really am hungry.
And all the dressing as well.
Yes.
Personalized.
Exactly. All right. So let's kind of, again, delineate the difference between program and course. Program are your overarching products of an entire curriculum. So think about how those objectives are going to be written more so than a specific course. So you are going to have different structures of objectives when you're comparing program to course. Higher level knowledge, skills, and attitudes represented in product. So some of your courses, 100 level, 200 level, if you're talking about the level of knowledge that a student has to be successful, some of your lower level courses aren't higher level thinking because they've got to gain that foundational knowledge to be able to end up with a higher level of knowledge. Your course outcomes, nuts and bolts of a particular subject, your building blocks for program, focuses on content and skills, and they're the goals of that specific course that contribute to the larger part of the whole, which is the program. So, steps to assess, I made little notes on here and I'm not even looking at them. Okay, so steps to assess our course objectives. We're going to identify, which you brought with you, so you've identified them. This presentation is actually from the perspective of they're creating them all from scratch, okay? But we already have ours, unless you couldn't get into print, then we have them here. But you identify the course objective student learning outcomes for your program or your course, determine practices used to achieve those through mapping, determine methods of assessment, gather evidence, and then close the loop, like the Deming circle. We're now into acting. What are we going to do based on the evidence that we gathered throughout the school year? Now, with that being said, we're actually going to try to tackle 1, 2, and 3 before you leave here this week, okay? The idea was to do this in preparation for program annual reviews, which is coming down the pike from the administration. They're kind of tightening up that process. And so what this Faculty Development Institute is designed to do is to prepare you and give you the skills and tools to be able to go through that process as deemed by the administration. So while we may be doing things on different types of forms, my Excel spreadsheet may look different than your Excel spreadsheet, what we are doing today and this week is training you to think that way so that you can fill out their forms and everything can be tightened up and evaluated. Any questions so far at all?
Mine's a bigger, it's a sort of a macro level process question. There's been a lot of turnover within the institution over the last several years. And not all of us have access to a database or a primary location where past SLOs were organized or identified. And so I think part of what would be really helpful for people who have been designated as program chairs, for people who are in charge of accreditation, is that somebody can walk them through the various files and folders in various locations to see if there actually is an existing document from some point in history where SLOs were originally identified. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I have those from our last SACS accreditation.
That would be really helpful, because not all of us have those in our departmental folders. So
We got them out of the course catalog.
Or, yeah, exactly.
Whatever we got in that course catalog is what I have.
So knowing who that point person is who has that information would be really, really helpful to have in a new orientation for new faculty and new chairs.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, I did, yeah.
I wrote that down as a follow-up on my notes.
But unless you know that, you don't know to go to them. And like you said, you go through handbooks or spend.
Well, for us, we were just talking, I know we're doing program ones now, but for some of us, we had to start our course ones from scratch too, just because unless you happen to have a copy of an old syllabi, when there was turnover and, my predecessors out the door and I'm in, you don't have a copy, you had to go regrade from scratch.
And we had courses that had 13, 14, 15 SLOs. In those older syllabi.
You got to know everything. Or you're flunking if you don't know everything. Okay, so we'll,
So that, before I lost that thought.
okay.
Thank you.
All right, so now we are going to talk about the effective student learning outcome. And this is going to lead us up to our first set of activities. So SLOs are SMART. They are specific, measurable, attainable, they focus on student results, and they are timely, meaning there is a criteria of time under which the objective has to be mastered. If you look at this handout right here, this is a handout. I have the acronym SMART at the bottom. It's an outcome review checklist. We are going to be looking at this checklist and all of your objectives that you brought with you and doing a double take here and making sure we have everything's all lined up. Steps to writing SLOs. So if you were like Sarah, who wasn't given any SLOs, the first thing she would do is in one sentence, describe one major piece of knowledge, skill, or attitude a student should gain by the end of the course or program. So that's kind of the mindset. So when you are looking at these objectives, we're not writing them from scratch. We're not creating a sentence, but make sure that sentence describes one major piece of knowledge, not two, not accumulation of four, but one. Action verbs, use Bloom's taxonomy, but I'm going to talk about that in just a minute, and limit to one verb. Let's just put it this way. We can only do one thing at a time. Multitasking is a farce. It's a lie. We can task hop, but we can't do two things at once. Okay? Therefore, our objectives should not require our students to do two things. It should just be one. Make sure that whatever you're asking, whatever your objective says, that you can know that the student got it, that it can be observed and it can be measured. If you're asking somebody to understand something, how are you measuring understand? Because they don't have a blank look on their face? That's subjective, okay? It has to be measurable, observable. And then ensure that the student is clear, the objective is clear and understandable to the student. To me, this is probably the most important thing. If your students do not know what they are supposed to learn, they're not gonna. They may not know the vocabulary or the conceptual or the theoretical premise behind that particular objective. That's what you're going to teach them. But think about it this way. If I went to a country, which could be any country other than America, I wouldn't be able to speak the language because I am not bilingual, okay? And so I will go there and I will read something and I won't know what it says and I'll be completely lost. I won't even have a clue. Let me take that back. Let's say I went to Germany. I would be lost completely. I have no knowledge whatsoever of German. I wouldn't be able to understand or do what they were asking me to do. Now, if I went back to Panama, where I had spent some time and I was a little more familiar with, I would recognize a few words and I would understand what they wanted me to do. For example, if it says cerveza, I know that means beer. So I do have it. But again, back to your classroom, if a student is looking at an objective and they have no idea what it means, then they're not going to know what they need to be doing, regardless of whether you're given the content or not. So it's really important that the students, before they start learning, know what it is they're about to learn and connect it to something that they have already learned. So let's do this. Measurable. Okay, so here's the other thing I want to think about, and we're getting ready to get into our learning objectives and kind of making sure what we have in front of us is observable, is measurable, and I'll say this multiple times in the next 3 sessions when we talk about this alignment. What are your students doing? Do. So that verb. So if I say we need to discuss the differences between yellow and blue. So what are my students doing with that objective? Discuss the differences. So what are they doing? They're talking. What other ways can you discuss? Right? What other ways can you discuss? Do you see what I'm saying? They actually have to do something to do that. Okay. Keep that thought in mind. And the easiest way to make sure your objectives are something that your students are doing, not thinking about, not students will understand are your verb lists. So let me explain to you what you have with your verb list. Okay, this are Bloom's taxonomy's verb list. In order from left to right, moving up the knowledge level chain. Okay, these are action verbs, and it's the most widely used set of action verbs for student learning outcomes. However, flip over. When you get into situations, and I see this in nursing, and I know this can happen in education, where you're assessing more values and attitudes rather than particular skills, patient to patient or nurse to patient interactions. I mean, sometimes Bloom doesn't have the right verb for that because Bloom is more action oriented on content per se. Whereas Craftwell's affective domain, affective is how people feel, and that may lend itself, these verbs may lend themselves better for your clinical experiences and that sort of thing. So it's not so much content as it is applying the content that you have learned. And lastly, our very first FDI ever, we went through Fink's instructional design for significant learning, and his verb list kind of, in my opinion, kind of marries Bloom's and Craftwell. So he has some touchy-feely verbs in here, and some action verbs as well, content action verbs. So as you go through and start looking and assessing your course and program outcomes, reference those verbs. If you have something on there, a verb that's not on one of those lists, then you need to see me. You need to make sure that you have the right verb, because I don't know how many more are left or out there. Okay. Any questions so far about what we've talked about? You've got your verb lists. You understand that objectives need to be SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, are relevant, and timely.
I don't know, I might refresh my memory, but there's a called backward design. So,
Right.
You start from the, okay, good. There's something like that, which I really like it, because I'm not quite familiar with writing the objective, but I know how to write the questions.
Right.
So from questions that I write, I can go back to the objectives. That's my strategy.
Well, that's fine, as long as you have the end in mind before you start with the questions. And really, backwards design, it says designing with the end in mind, I think is the catch-all phrase there. And basically, it starts off with you design your assessment first, and then you work your way backwards. I caution taking a linear approach to that. To me, I would kind of go back and forth with it.
I think I agree with the point that she's talking about, because it's really based on Wiggins' work. And what you say is all learning begins with a question. And in all of our standards and outcome-based learning, we're missing that. That's not the point of it.
Right.
We have to know the question to make sense of the outcome.
Right.
So that's what in all of his work, he takes you start with, you might have an outcome, but if you don't know the essential questions that go with the outcome means nothing. Yeah, and that is such an important process in all of this.
Yeah. And for whatever it's worth, I don't know if nursing can take half a minute and talk about how you work from your standards to your programmatic outcomes, but for us in education, we have advanced teacher leader standards that are brand new. But we also have professional skills that people absolutely have to master if they're going to be successful in the classroom. So our outcomes, both at the programmatic level, are anchored to, number one, the standards, and number two, those absolute skills that people have to have mastered. And then, going back to what you both said, the program SLOs are aligned with those, And that's where we begin that essential, that's where I begin the essential question asking, because people may do it differently in the process.
With us, we have content type objectives and performance objectives. So we're needing to connect the content that we're teaching with a performance, okay? Because in the end, that's what they're gonna be doing, is taking the content and actually performing it. So,
Yeah,
We have, well, Shannon, you want to address it?
yeah,
Well, I mean, it's exactly what you said, we have certain accreditation standards, certain performance standards. We just had to make sure they're all aligned, just the way that you do it. If we do have a particular skill set that we have to have our graduates meet in order to do so.
But the ultimate outcome is that they have the knowledge and skills to pass NCLEX and provide safe content care.
yep. And not everybody across the various programs have those external sets of standards
Right.
that anchor their programs. So thinking about what those sort of penultimate, is that what you're saying? Skills are, both in terms of content knowledge and performance, to me is the anchor that guides the programmatic SLOs.
I agree.
Is that clear as
Yeah,
water?
yeah. And I agree, the whole backwards design thing, but what I want to caution people doing is thinking that it's just a straight process. I agree with everything you're all saying, but you can't just think of a test question and then all of a sudden be, okay, there's my objective. Like there's got to be a lot of bouncing back and forth. What is it? Iterative. Design is iterative, yeah. Okay, so components of an effective objective, I mean, we got the SMART, you have your checklist. This is just another way to say the same thing I've already mentioned twice. You have your action verb. Your action verb, you act on something. Identify a what? A relevant database. When? For what reason? For a research paper. So you have an action, a product, a context, and a condition. Those things will tell the student what they need to do, what they need to do it with, and where they need to do it, okay? All right, good versus bad. You have the little guys, it's from Mad Magazine. Anybody notice that? Spy versus Spy, couldn't think of the name. Okay. So take a few minutes and discuss with your people, hey, you know they have to be measurable. You know they have to be observable. You've got a checklist. You decide which are good and bad. Take 5 or so minutes and then we'll discuss. And you don't have to do it by yourself. You can work with a buddy. This isn't solo. Engage. right. Have you had time to go through some of them? Let's talk as a group. Number one, good, bad. Bad. Why? How do you measure understanding? How do you determine what's thorough? Yeah, that's true.
What are you gonna make them do?
You're gonna throw them to Wall Street. That's about all you can do here. All right, help students to understand the foundation, good or bad? Bad. Okay, let's talk about number 3, administer physical fitness assessments, good or bad?
You can do it. You can measure it.
How many people said good? How many people said bad?
It's an in between.
Okay, I think it's not specific enough. Therefore, now, and this is where I had trouble with it. Okay, to me, it sounds like it's teacher-centered. This is what the teacher is going to go in and do. It is not students. However, if you are teaching physical education teachers, then this one is okay.
Like if they're in lab, they're testing them on a practical, can they do this right in front of my face?
Well, except the administrators, are you administering it or they administering it? Oh,
I read it that way.
Oh, okay. All right, so you saw it as student. I'm student ability. Yeah. Okay. I saw it both ways. I can see that way, but then I was like, but then I could also see it as really poor corrected getting their content. All right, enhance students' ability. 2, 3, 4, bad. Okay, promote. Encourage. Bad. All right, what did you find out about the last 5? Y'all didn't get that far? All right, demonstrate ability to make practical application of information in a meaningful way. What is that? No, it's nothing.
We reworded it to be specific, like the beginning is good.
Right, demonstrate is fine,
We had to add
but
words
then it
like
went,
science.
And by the way, specific can also be in science.
yes.
Specific doesn't mean it's written.
Right. Specific has, you have to be able to say, nice kid, you do that, and know what that is. Identify elements from periodic table. Yeah, that was a good one. Apply theories of social psych.
Yes.
We'll probably do that here right now. Describe how buildings are structurally supported.
Yes.
Good. And construct a sentence in Spanish. Good. Okay. So exercise 1. I got. Okay. Now, for the rest of the time that we are here, you are going to look at your course objectives and program outcomes, or just course. Choose one, do them both. We are going to compare both after lunch today, okay? What we need to make sure right now is, number 1, those objectives are SMART. I know from looking at objectives from years past, and there's some of them that we have that aren't real SMART. And that's not saying the ones that you have I just say, I know here at Midway, we have objectives out there that aren't smart. So now's our time to take what we have and fix the ones that need to be fixed. There's two things that go along with this analysis. Number one, check your verbs. Number two, check the structure of the objective. Is there a condition? Is there, I gotta turn it on the other side. The other thing you want to start thinking about is within your course, specifically within your course, where your objective lies on the knowledge plane. So you have dimensions. The lower level dimension, like remember, understand, remember, you just memorize facts. To create, which is the upper level of knowledge, you want to analyze to make sure that are your objectives aligned with the level of course that you're teaching. So if you have a 100 level course and 6 of your 7 objectives say evaluate, you may want to rethink either the number of that course or what you're teaching in it. Does that make sense? So right now, you are spending the next 10 minutes analyzing the verbs and your objectives and make sure that they are all the way they're supposed to be. When we come back after lunch, we're going to be mapping from one to the other.